Okay. Good. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. A very good morning to you. Well, thank you for joining us at the thematic session on water's role in early warning systems. Well, before we officially open the session, I'd like to take this opportunity to extend our gratitude to WMO for leading a thematic session since 2020. We are very impressed that WMO has been so committed in promoting knowledge, technologies, and practices in addressing water issues, which concerns the life and the lifeline of millions of people. So I'm very pleased to introduce to you the moderator, Maria Coslin, the coordinator of the members of the activities of the Water and Climate Coalition at WMO. And over to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Christine, and it's an honor to be organizing this with you. So thank you very much for having WMO and inviting us to again co-host this session with you. Welcome to all the participants, panelists, organizers. It's lovely to be here this morning with you. This session is on water's role in early warning systems, how to harness the integrated water resources management to provide early warnings for all. And let me just give you a quick run of the show. Today, our session will be opened by remarks from Dr. Stefan Uhlenbruck. And then we will go to our speakers. We have 4 speakers today. Our first speaker, Dr. Firas Al-Janabi. He'll be explaining why, especially in urban conditions, water management and early warning systems are related and what is the relevance there. Our second speaker, Mr. Hendrik Larsen, will bring together the connections on IWRM and early warnings. And then after that, our third speaker is Dr. Sulagna Mishra. She will have a little overview of how globally connected hydrological systems and better data could have a role in all of this. And then finally, we will finish with Dr. Marco Massabo, who will conclude on discussing how to better disseminate data, especially hydrological data, and how to make it user-friendly and accessible and relevant for early warnings. After those presentations, we will have a few presentations, and then after those, we'll go to a panel discussion together with the panelists. And we want to keep this session very interactive, so I have prepared some tools for us to work together and also for all the participants to be engaged. So I hope this will work. We'll see soon. And so Dr. Uhlenbruck, he is the Director of Hydrology, Water and Cryosphere branch at the WMO. And previously, he's been a professor at IHE Delft on hydrology and water resources since 2005. And he also used to work as a program director at the International Water Management Institute. So I would like to start off the session with Dr. Uhlenbruck's remarks. Please, the floor is yours.
Morning. Colleagues, could you kindly confirm if you see my screen or?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah, sorry.
Perfect. No worries.
No, we don't want to start with the thank you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Sorry.
Also at the top, you have top left, there's the play button you could put in because now we can see only your, it's a wrong mode actually. We see your notes right now. So it's okay. Always these technicalities.
My apologies.
So top.
Better now?
Perfect. That's
Good.
excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, colleagues, good morning, or at least early morning here in Europe. Instead of opening remarks, I prepared a couple of slides, and I thought it's good to in the next 10 minutes or so to set the scene about early warning for olds, and particularly give a perspective on the importance of the water-related warnings that are necessary for floods and droughts. And many colleagues contributed to this presentation. Big thank you to all of them. At WMO, we follow 8 long-term strategic objectives. You can see them here. No one is surprised by a flood, and everybody is prepared for a drought. These are the 2 long-term ambitions that are most relevant for my presentation this morning. The other long-term ambitions that we have relate to food security, to the quality of data. 5 and 6 are related to science and knowledge, and 7 to sustainable development, while finally 8 relates to water quality. But I really would like to concentrate today on floods and droughts. Earlier this year, on the 23rd of March, on World Met Day, the UN Secretary General came up with a challenge, and he made a statement, and he said, in 5 years from now, though by the end of 2027, everyone around the world should be covered by an early warning system. You know that every year thousands of people die because of a lack of early warning. If it's not millions, we come to some numbers later. Infrastructure damage, ecosystem damages, etc., which could be prevented if we improve our early warning capacity. An interesting study I found from the Global Commission on Adaptation. You might know this organization. I think that the headquarters in the Netherlands, and they made a comparison, and they looked at, it's the Global Commission on Climate Adaptation. So they made a comparison about different different climate adaptation techniques, and they compared making infrastructure, for instance, more resilient. And they found a cost-benefit ratio roughly 5 to 1. Yeah, you see this, the upper figure here. For improving dryland agriculture, more drought-resistant crops, etc., that's also about 5 to 1. Protecting mangroves and making water resources management more resilient. You have different cost-benefit ratios. While I agree there's a huge spread of these cost-benefit ratios, and to calculate all the indirect costs is very, very difficult, I know. So there's a significant spread. But interesting is by far the largest cost-benefit ratio they found for strengthening early warning systems. So it's 1 to 9 on average, and in many case studies they found the cost-benefit ratios above 10. So it's really a safe investment, a good bet if you invest in early warning systems on average. But what is the status of current early warning systems? You see here some recent data where they mapped, as part of the Sendai framework, mapped the reported multi-hazard early warning system, and you see where we have blue and where we have gray areas. No surprise, the gray areas are mainly in the global south. Interesting also, WMO made a study roughly a year ago where they compared water-related early warning systems, and you see here the percentage. Green means 2/3 up to 100% of the population are covered by early warning system, and for riverine floods it's more than half. However, as we learned by some bigger flooding in Western Europe, and so even if you are in the green category, it doesn't mean that everybody is really well protected. But you see here the different numbers, but you also see that particularly in the fields of flash floods and droughts, it's less than half of the population of the countries that is covered, and also the population at risk is then increasingly high. So early warning system is really a necessary investment. Some even call that, I recently heard that it's a low-hanging fruit in climate change adaptation. Well, I find that is a bit misleading because it sounds so simple. A low-hanging fruit is the fruit that you can pick so easily, but which is not always that easy. We know that, but it's really a good investment with a higher return of investment for society and the economies. The Secretary General of the UN then entrusted WMO to lead a process to develop an early warning system for all proposal, and then we at the COP he published an executive plan of that initiative, and we calculated some quite high numbers. It's more than 3 billion probably, but if you include all the hydrology related costs which we calculate, which is not all of them are in the 3 billion, then you'll probably end up with an investment needed of about 5 billion. Maybe keep in mind 5 billion for a second. We come to some higher numbers in a second. It has 4 main pillars. The one is to understand the risks, understand the knowledge, pillar 1. Second pillar is on observing, monitoring, but also forecasting extremes. Again, this is multi-hazard early warning. It's not only floods and droughts, but I want to put the water perspective again in a minute. And the other two pillars are about preparedness and response. While the last one on the bottom right is on dissemination and communication. And you see some numbers of investments that were calculated. And I'm sure these are kind of quick and dirty calculations, and the real numbers is very difficult, needs a very case-by-case decision. But the order of magnitude might not be completely off. Coming back to floods and droughts, I really believe this is very important. This is a figure which I borrowed from the annual State of the Water report that we published just a month ago, and no, less than a month ago. And you see here some major hazards on in floods and droughts that were calculated with more than 200 casualties. And also you see here significant costs, and these are only the significant events in 2021. For instance, that we had major flooding in Western Europe, 200 casualties. Mainly in Germany and Belgium, and the total costs were more than 40 billion. Or the Hurricane Ida in North America was more than 70 billion. In India, many casualties. China had many floods in that year, etc. You see the numbers. But coming back to the earlier numbers that I said, we probably need to invest some 5 billion to provide better early warning. Then 5 billion put that all in perspective, I believe. And it's not that if we invest the 5 billion, we don't have hazards anymore, no disasters, of course not. But if you're able through early warning to reduce the damage, the impact of these events, that would be already a big success and would pay off economically. Here in 2022, yes, the year didn't finish, but these are some major events you see in 2022 so far, and a major drought in the Greater Horn of Africa. Floods in Pakistan, I come to that in a second. Heat wave and drought, which is always a combination. It's not that one hazard happens alone, or they always often happen in parallel or trigger each other or are cascading. And the heat wave often is related to major drought, which significant impact for economy, for agriculture, etc. Droughts in China and Hurricane Ida in the US and Cuba. So all of these have a strong water footprint. They're not only water events, heat waves, obviously, but with a lot of implications from a water point of view. The floods and droughts is an interesting story here. You see a slide which I borrowed from my friend Kenzo Hiroki. I happened to be there in May, June earlier this year, and it was an unprecedented heat wave in South Asia. In Pakistan and India, it was hot. I was walking around there, and we looked at some gauging station, and everything was dry. It was more than 49 degrees. A station nearby, I wasn't at the station, it was measured more than 50 degrees Celsius. It was really hot. And and while we had this heat wave, there was still flooding in the river, and that was because of the extremely strong melt what we had from the Himalaya mountains. So we had a very strong flooding during the heat wave because of snow and ice melt, which was not as disastrous as the later main flooding, but it also caused a damage of infrastructure. And then just after that heat wave, with a significant drought, a flooding happened where the whole monsoon rainfall, which normally Pakistan receives, was falling in less than a week, and a total estimated damage was in the order of 40 billion. And a colleague recently told me, living in Pakistan, that the flooding is still not completely gone. There are still areas which are inundated with the significant impact for the people. I think I'm running a little bit out of time. So this is just one more point. These are the total numbers of people that are affected by floods, and you see here, by disasters, and you see here again that about 2/3 are impacted by floods and droughts. Droughts is also a major killer in Africa as well as in Asia. It's the floods. So you see the significance of floods and droughts in this early warning, in the multiple hazard perspective. There's a strong impact on water. I skip a couple of slides and would like to say, while I was speaking today mainly about floods and droughts, I would like to say that better understanding of water and data information, being able to make better predictions is beneficial for society at large. While many of you know that, I just want to remind us it's benefiting many sectors, and last but not least, peace and security. With this, I would like to thank you, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan. You really showed that there's a connection between water and hydrology and early warning. So I'm really looking forward to also our presentations from our speakers now on this topic. So thank you for setting the scene. Very well. Let's move on to the next part of the session now. So I actually wanted to demonstrate a little bit how we will do some engagement today with you. So I'll just quickly show you what we will be doing today between each of the presentations, so you have a little idea. So let me share my slide first. So if you can see at the top of your Zoom screen, there is this view options button. Please press that one. And under that one, you can find this annotate. And from that annotate, you can choose a stamp. So in the activities today, we will need to use this one. So it might be even a good idea to take a little picture of this one so you can see it later on in the session. Perfect. And yes, if you manage to find it, you can put a little note here. Are you ready to start the session? Are you still sleeping? So we can see if people have found it. Perfect, you're able to find the button. Excellent. Thanks. I will be showing this also a little bit later to you, so don't worry, but I hope this is a little idea. This is what we will be doing. Do a little engagement this way. Try to keep you all active, and also please, if you have any questions to our panelists, as Christine kindly mentioned in the chat, you can put them in the chat, or you can also raise your hand after any of the presentations if any questions were raised. So we'll be happy to have a bit more of an interaction with the panelists there. So our first speaker of today will be Dr. Firas Al-Janabi. He's the coordinator of Global Water and Climate Adaptation Center. He's been working with the TU Dresden, Germany, as a senior lecturer for many years, has a broad experience in project management in the global context. So please, Dr. Al-Janabi, whenever you're ready, I would like to welcome you to the stage.
Thank you very much, Maria. Can you see my slide?
Perfect, we can see it.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity, actually. It's quite interesting, these 2 days discussion, and I was following the discussion of yesterday, and now we are focusing more in details on some aspects. Now, let me start my presentation with some pictures for brainstorming. As we see here, we are seeing these kind of pictures now everywhere. It's not only in Europe, it's not only in Africa, it's everywhere. So this is from Baghdad. This is also from Iraq, where I come from. It's from Basra city. Here you see this is flood events after the Adai cyclone in Mozambique areas. And we can see also here, this is in North Berlin in Germany 2 years ago. See this size of damage in the small town. Now, from the other side, we have a lot of droughts. It's clear more and more now because of climate change, we have already droughts everywhere. And this problem with droughts increasing in different places. Europe also, although there is already not a very extreme, so to say, effects of the droughts, but we already started to see the effects of droughts in many places in Germany. And what's this drought doing actually is 2 things. First is disturb the actual amount of providing food and agriculture, at the same time put more pressure on our urban areas, because most of the people living in the rural areas, because of the long-term droughts, they try to shift and move to the urban areas and put more pressure on the cities. and makes our cities more sensitive to the terms of floods, and make it also difficult when we talk about early warning system in the cities. Now, let us talk about some facts here. The urban population is increasing more and more, and we have now something like 55% of the urban population. This is globally, but in some cases, if you go to some countries, you find the numbers reaching maybe 90% of the population living only in urban areas. What's this doing actually? If you have more increased urban areas, and most of the time you increase the impervious surfaces. What does this mean? It means that most of the rainfall will be as a runoff. It's not going to go to the groundwater. It's not going to be a percolation or infiltration, but most of the time will be very difficult to manage because it will be directly rainfall runoff. And also because of due to climate change, that we have already increase of extreme events. Before we had sometimes long-term or long events like 1 day, 2 days of precipitation. Now we are facing in many places change of the precipitation patterns. So we have, instead of having the amount of precipitation that comes maybe in 5 hours or 6 hours, we have now the same amount that comes in half an hour, which puts a lot of pressure on our urban drainage systems. Yeah, and it's always needed to have a clear, reliable methods when we come to talk about hazard and vulnerability. Now, if you see this figure, this is the usual way of the end-to-end early warning system. You start with real-time data collection, modeling, forecasting, early warning dissemination, decision, and then response. So this is the general one. If you talk about floods, if you talk about droughts, if you talk about other things, and it differs actually from one place to another place based on the size of the catchment, based on the size of the city, which kind of element that you have. So this is one of the important figures from the WMO publication. Thank you, ABFM, for that. And then when we come to speak about the droughts early warning system, it's actually differ a lot from the floods early warning system. We will talk about it. We have here long-term impact that we need to think about to decide, for example, for the seasonal forecasting. If you go to observation monitoring, and then how to make the research application, communication, outreach. So this is the round, but for the droughts, we have more time to react. And we need to differ between if this is a hydrological or meteorological droughts. So this is we have to focus on. But when it comes to flood risk analysis, we have more or less the same element, the hazard, the exposure, and the variability, but we have a less response time. If we talk about the cities, most of our cities now located either around rivers or close to coastal areas, where we face all the usual types of floods, fluvial, the river, coastal, urban, or flash floods. We are suffering in many places in our cities, and make of course, the damage based on the events on the risk also need to be calculated. Now, for the early warning system components, we need to focus on the 4 basic elements that the risk knowledge, monitoring and forecasting, warning dissemination, and community acceptance. These 4 elements, if we start with the risk knowledge, of course, without understanding what we have from precipitation, we are expecting, we are not really going to give the correct response or to give the right information when we talk about early warning system. So we need really high quality data that we are able to manage. Of course, this is one of the problems. Now, data sometimes becomes either there are no data at all in some places, or there are data, but you are not able to access these data because most of the water data considered to be classified data. You cannot share this information, for example, with neighboring countries, which normally you need sometimes when you talk about early warning system, if this river is a river based in 1 or 2 or 3 countries. We don't have clear flood hazard maps that we should have for our cities. And of course, this is the financial values that we are going also to talk as one of the challenges. Monitoring of forecasting now actually is getting better and better. If you see, for example, the overall programs, international programs, for example, the flash flood guidance system from the WMO, some other regional and local programs in many countries, you see that there is already advance in the forecasting and monitoring. One of the problem is most of these forecast systems based on the satellite data, which is from one side is okay because it provide accessible, cheap to many countries that they don't have the data, but from the other side does not really provide the correct information when you talk about early warning system and response. Now, one of the attempts that we are doing here at the TU Dresden, we are designing one of our projects. We are designing the virtual city model that we are using a digital urban twin by using 2D model and 3D model to make it a little bit more to understand better the risk and also to try to use the technologies in designing the future urban flooding and early warning system. So this is our main background of the model, virtual city model, 2D model, 3D models, and then after that we will go to damage model that you can understand. And when we talk about digital twin model, we talk about having high quality information about our buildings, about our cities, where we can really then rely on when we have a flood events, and we try to distribute the information regarding the flood events. Here, this is the 2D model in urban area, where you can decide and select the city and see the risk. At the beginning, this is just an analysis for the city called Florissimo, and then after that, you can also use the technology to even have the information about the flooded buildings, and you see how much water is entering and when exactly the limit. So it's really high technology, needs a lot of information, of course. It's not that easy to manage, but and then after that, of course, then you can see the damage, which kind of damage that you have, where is this damage located, and how you can deal with this damage. And of course, you can use different types of sensors because most of the time in the urban areas, it's not easy to quantify and manage all the information. You need a lot of sensors to put in the city, in the buildings, in the urban drainage system to monitor and get more information about the floods and also to provide correct information. Now, this basic model actually was connected with another model to make it more early warning system. It's satellite data ground station. We call it Wet Urban. It's already a running project now, and this can be combined and can be used in different cities. Of course, then you need to provide high information. So we took Dresden in Germany as a city for the model itself, but could be also used for another places. Now, after talking about all these models and this information, we talk about in case of floods. Most of the time, we need to give the correct information. How we can reach this information, there's always a lack of the information. One of the, for example, what happens a few days ago in Germany, we have received all on our mobile system, just a test of the warning to know how they can disseminate the information for the people. And was on the 8th of December, where everybody mobile got the information. This is a way. Of course, there are different ways to disseminate and communicate the information regarding this, but might sometimes make it very difficult if you are in the cities. Now, another point is community acceptance. One of the things when I was in Mozambique after this cyclone, there was a mission from WMO to see what happened after this events. Actually, although there was already, they have a early warning system, they gave the information, but the community did not accept this information. Some of them, they don't trust the government. So from the other point, even if you have the information and you know your house is going to be flooded, you are not going to leave it because you are afraid that someone will come and steal your things. So a lot of people died because they didn't want to respond to the action needed. Now, this is my last slide, actually. If we talk about challenges, there are a lot of challenges, but I think the situation, if you compare the situation now and 5 years ago or 10 years ago, we are really much more advanced in early warning systems. Still, a lot of problems need to be solved. Data is still really a big challenge, sharing the data. If we talk about models, then we talk about hundreds of models, which is not really clear which one is the best and how to deal with this. We have always a financial challenges that normally makes it very difficult, because if we talk about developed countries, then we are on the safe side because they have the money, they have the models. If you go to the poor countries, then this is not only about using the technology, but also to train the people and to find the disseminate the correct information and have to the correct coordination. Challenges, social challenges, as I said, this is one of the problems where people need to understand and accept the risk, and institutional challenges also, because sometimes many countries, they have different departments, they are not really related. At the end, you don't know from where you get this correct information and which one to trust. And with that, I would like to thank everybody, and I hope I didn't take a lot of time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Al-Janabi. It was a very interesting presentation, and I love how you can show us how to do a virtual city model, which is like very high tech, do 3D and 2D models, and then take it all the way to the community level. That's like, there are so many, I think this would also make it different in different regional settings, most likely, as you mentioned, in different countries, you would respond differently. We actually have one question here from the audience. I wonder if you would like to answer this one. So you already might have touched on it a little bit, but Lee Jun has asked if early warning systems would also apply for bushfires or other similar events. I know we talked a lot about floods especially, so would that also apply to different kinds of hazards? And would the early warning system be widely accessible by public or just the governments, for example?
Thank you for the question. Actually, if you talk about early warning system, you can put it for everything. Now, which kind of information actually you need to consider this as an early warning system? Is it how much time you have for response? So if you talk about fire, then how much time you have response to this fire? So it's always about time and information. And if you talk about sensors or info, I don't know, it's for me, it's not my area to speak about fire, but I think it's always about the response time and the technology. The second question, if this is accessible for the public, and of course some of the models need to be only for the government, because general public does not understand all the terms inside these models, so they need to have received only the final message from one side. From the other side, we see still some of the models that are owned by companies, and these are most of the time black box. So they don't want to share the information. So this is a company responsible. At the end, you get the final products, but you don't know what's going on inside this model. So 2 points. But I think should not be accessible all the information from the modeling, but at least the correct information that the government should disseminate after receiving this early warning information. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So ideally, we could make this accessible for everyone, but there are some challenges that might not make it possible.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Any other participants, if you have questions, please feel free to put them again in the chat. Thank you so much again, Firas Al-Janabi, for your presentation, and we'll get back to you with the panel. We can ask more questions in the end. I'll again do a little engagement to see if we can have people here active. So let me again show, we might have had some new, oh, you can see just the application now. There we go. So again, I'll just show you quickly what we're going to do. We can annotate by using the annotate button at the top. Finding the view options, annotate, and then I would recommend using the stamp for the activities that we do, so you can put a mark on wherever is relevant. So please open the top of the annotate and take the stamp, and then you can answer this. So why do we need to consider urban population when planning early warning systems? Is it A, because more than half of the world's population live in urban areas? B, because increased urban cover leads to more impervious surfaces, which can lead to more widespread urban flooding? Or C, extreme precipitation will increase significantly due to climate change and lead to more flooding? So which one do you think is the reason? This kind of might be a little bit of a compact question because perfect. We've got some answers in all of them, which is correct because all of them have an impact actually. Because of the extreme precipitation, we can get more floods, and that can be more dangerous in the cities, and we have more population in cities. So all of these play actually a role in this connection. Let me clear the clear. And then second question, you might have had an idea about this based on already Uhlenbrooks and Aljanabis. So what is a multi-hazard early warning system? Is it A, just the technical part, having observations and forecasting? Or B, does it consist of 4 parts, having disaster risk knowledge, observation and forecasting, dissemination and communication, and preparedness and response? Or is it just C, how the warnings is disseminated? Perfect. So you have been listening, that's great. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing now. So we can move on to the next panelist. So our next panelist will be Mr. Henrik Larsen. He's the Senior Water Resources Management Expert at DHA Water and Environment. He has over 25 years of experience as a consultant and advisor in more than 25 countries. And he's helped develop policies and plans for implementation of the integrated water resources management at national and river basin levels. And most recently, he has spent 3 years as the Chief Technical Advisor of the Mekong River Commission. Mr. Larsen, you're warmly welcome to give us your presentation. Hi. I think you're still muted.
I'm so sorry. Sorry.
No worries.
Thanks for having this opportunity to talk to you about early warning systems. Do you see my presentation on the screen?
Yes, however, I don't know if it's in the presentation mode.
No,
yet.
it will be in a moment.
Okay, perfect.
Now it's in presentation mode, right?
Yes, excellent. Thanks.
Good. Let me just get started. Okay, just 2 words about the UNEP DHI Center, because I'm representing here today the UNEP DHI Center. UNEP couldn't be here. They asked us to present on their behalf. But we are a collaboration center supporting UNEP in its global mandate. We have at DHI the technical capacity. We are a global research/consultancy organization with more than 1,000 experts in water and environment, and we help UNEP in their 3 main themes on water management action, environment action, and climate action. And we draw on DHI's expertise in water management and project implementation. So this is about UNEP DHI Center in a nutshell. This presentation will cover the link between IWM, climate change adaptation, and early warning systems. And I'll start by talking about what is an early warning system, and my colleague Dr. Al-Janabi already mentioned that, so maybe we can move fast on that. I'll show some examples of application and some of my assessments of what are the challenges and requirements in moving forward on early warning systems. But we all know the situation, the water cycle is at risk, which means our societies is at risk. Global warming and increasing pressure on surface and groundwater are affecting all ecosystems and the water cycle. And we have heard talks about the extreme weather events, and which is becoming the new normal, so to speak, in both urban and rural areas. And most responses to climate change are actually about improving how water resources are managed and used. So it means that integrated water resources management is actually an adaptation solution to reduce society's vulnerability to climate change. And early warning systems for floods and droughts are contributing to IWM implementation, I believe. So we need to take action to better understand and manage water resources. That is one of our best ways to proactively manage the impacts of climate change. So in a nutshell, early warning systems is about planning and acting for the water cycle, or to take account of water cycle uncertainty across different sectors. This could be for household purposes, it could be protecting irrigation, manage flood and drought control systems, take action on how to operate hydropower systems, and how to protect ecosystems. Early warning systems work at different timescales. Short term, maybe up to a week or 10 days. We're talking about forecasting, about warning, impact assessment. We can maybe do some mitigation on how we operate various sluices, gates, and so on. But it's about predicting in detail what is going to happen where in the short term, and how can we warn those affected by those impacts. And then there are seasonal timescales, maybe up to a year, where we're talking about storage facilities. If we are forecasting droughts in 3 or 6 months, how can we operate our infrastructure to save water, to store more water? How can we adjust our agricultural practices or managing actions we can take in the agricultural field? How can we conserve wetlands? How can we protect wetlands? And in the long term, larger than a year, up to decades, we're talking about development of infrastructure. If we see a more stronger tendency for droughts or increased floods, we can we can mitigate that by investing in relevant infrastructure. We can build different climate change adaptation measures. We can take account of, or we can design changes in our catchment to mitigate those impacts that we see coming. So we can talk about early warnings at a range of timescales here. And the components of an early warning flood system, I think Dr. Al-Janabi already presented this essentially the same slide in a different layout with the different aspects. So I won't go into detail about that. You just heard from Dr. Al-Janabi these components. But what is it used for, this early warning system? And I'm focusing on flood warning systems. I'll come back a little bit on droughts as well. But it's basically about alerting authorities, stakeholders, and communities well in advance of the actual arrival of a flood, so that people in their various circumstances, they have time to act, to move, or to protect their belongings, to reinforce their protection mechanism, or to operate structures, gauge, sluices, whatever. Excuse me. Can it prevent floods, an early warning system? No, it cannot. But it can predict the spatial and temporal evolution of potential floods, and in this way assist people in taking the right and the timely actions. So what are the actions that a flood early warning system can trigger? Well, it could be fast emergency relief. If you know where the flood is hitting, you know where people will need help. You can direct vehicles. You can direct transport of first aid kits and so on. And you can have more efficient water management operations. So there are very valuable actions that can be instigated, and Stefan also mentioned the economic impacts, the economic value of those actions that can be taken at the back of an early warning system. So I think that the case has been made for that. There's a very important element of a dissemination system in the early warning system, and maybe something that has not always received enough attention, but that is the link to really the recipients of the information that needs to come or go to the population, because the population in flood-prone areas, they require timely warnings. And the infrastructure operators need guidance for how they can operate their various infrastructure. So we need to, as designers and managers of those systems, we need to determine appropriate messaging, content, and formats and timing for the right target groups. And we need to implement and operationalize the workflows that enable the authorities to inform key stakeholders on a timely basis. So one example of an application that we did, we helped the authorities in the Chao Phraya Basin in Thailand. The challenge was that in 2011 there were abnormal monsoon rainfalls that caused severe flooding in Thailand. Maybe you remember that it was a very famous incident, more than 800 dead, and many industries heavily impacted. So the authorities really knew that they had to act to mitigate the consequences from future flooding scenarios. And we helped them establish an early warning system with real-time flood prediction, a warning system based on real-time hydrometeorological and weather forecast data that provided a 7-day forecasting window for them. And the outcome was that the authorities can now prioritize, they can plan, they can initiate emergency actions days and hours ahead of incidents. And the impacts of flooding caused by heavy monsoons are now reduced significantly. lives are saved and industry production remains stable, agricultural damages are limited. So that's one example. Another example is a drought early warning system based on our global hydrological model that is based on available water in the root zone, where we estimate on a scale from no drought risk to drought is very likely. It's about water content for plants in the root zone. And we can simulate for the entire globe actually, but here we have shown Africa on a 3-month scale from June to March last year, where the risk is deemed to be highest and lowest for drought. So that could help agricultural extension services to know where the risk of drought is high, where they need to take action. So what are some of the challenges and requirements for successful implementation of early warning system? I think that we need to make sure that users have the required skills. So we need hands-on and training and capacity building. We need systems that can be used easily and effectively. So we need a thorough understanding of the decisions to be supported and how the day-to-day use of the system works with the surrounding environment. There are some outdated IT systems out there, and we need updated in information technology, computers, equipment, and we need data, quick access to data that can be easily analyzed and reported, and not least, we need appropriate and effective dissemination mechanisms. Because if we just do the calculation, do the math, and get it to no one, it doesn't help anything. And we need to make sustainable planning for the post-assistance period. So we need to plan for sustainability of the institutional, the financing aspects that also Dr. Al-Junabi alluded to. So I think those are the most important things here. And with that, I want to conclude my presentation. I don't know if there are any questions or whether we take it under the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think what at least struck out to me was the fact that we need to think about like the time scale as well. Like it's not always just something that happens very quickly. You can also have events that or things that you need to think about for infrastructure development for the long term with the water, and with also how important still water plays a very key role in the whole early warning. Any questions for our dear panelist, Mr. Larsen, from the audience? Feel free to put them in the chat, and otherwise we'll go to some more questions at this point for audience. Thank you very much for your presentation again, and we'll get back to you in the panel part. Thank you. I'll jump over the previous questions, and please let me share. So please, at the top of your screen, you can find the view options, and then under that, the annotate, and then you can find, I recommend using stamp. So how much of the climate change impacts do you think is water related? This is just an idea, because I know there's different views on this. So from 0 to 100%, you can put your, hang on. Yeah, put your estimate on the scale. Yeah. Some people say 100%, some say 90%, maybe the other ones are almost like 70%. Yeah. I mean, as I said, there's like different estimates on this. So it's, I've heard anything between, let's say, 75 to 90%. So it kind of depends on how we calculate what is water related and what is an impact of climate change and all of that. But good guesses or guesstimates here. Let's have the next question. So we talked about the different times. So here's an example of, for example, a flash flood, which can be a very deadly one. How quickly do you think a flash flood is considered to occur? This wasn't exactly shown, but I think this will give you an idea of how quick this can be.
I think, Maria, for this question, maybe also how big the catchment is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that always depends. But actually, usually it's considered like to be within 6 hours, but it can also happen within a few minutes, or depending on exactly how big the catchment or what the impact is. So I think we'll be hearing more about this in actually the following presentation. So maybe they can shed some more light on this topic. So our next presenter, thank you everyone for participating in that. And I hope you're enjoying also having some engagement here. And let's see. So next speaker, we have Dr. Sulagna Mishra. She's a scientific officer in hydrology, water and cryosphere branch at the World Meteorological Organization. Before this, she worked on her PhD at the TU Dresden and developed models and tools for monitoring and mitigating pollution in river networks. And at WMO, she works with technical activities such as the hydrological status and outlook system. So please welcome Dr. Sulagna Mishra on our virtual stage.
Thank you, Maria.
You have your presentation on already. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I would just like to move to another screen. Just give me a second. You see the presenter view, right? Okay, perfect. Okay. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm very happy to follow up on the presentations that have already been made. Hendrik already spoke about the different kinds of forecastings that needs to be done, short-term, seasonal or long-term. Stefan spoke in length about how floods and droughts are in the most, predicting floods and droughts are in the ambitions of WMO. And if I would take from there on that water data is in fact very critical, and this is a slide that I stole from Stefan, that it's really critical for all these infrastructures that you see. It's necessary for climate analysis, for WASH, for food and agriculture, for any sector you name, and we need water data and information. However, we see that today 60% of the countries report the observing stations are declining. The amount of information that is being produced is either not of optimum quality or quantity, or it's not reliable enough to be able to produce information from there. And it's clear that we cannot manage something well that we don't measure. This is shedding lights on this one more time. So the surface observation that you see here, it's really fragmented. You see that there is the capacity all over is really not consistent. So it's also clear that the kind of information that we can produce from this kind of data is also not consistent at a global scale or even at a regional scale. And this figure shows us that the network is again in a declining state, or it's not adequate to meet all the user needs that we identify our members or the users mentioning us in different forums. but we do not have the infrastructure right now to be able to address all these issues at this stage. And not just that the observing stations are need improvement, but also we need improvement in how the data is managed, how we then produce information with this data. So the observing networks plus the data management system also needs improvement. And this brings us to this cycle of gaps, so to say. So why does this really happen? Why do we don't have enough investments when we know that from these kind of disasters, from a flood and from a flood or a cyclone, we have losses running into billions, into tens of hundreds of billions. Why don't we really have the kind of investment that's intuitive, that we should have it? It always starts with awareness, the lack of awareness in both societal and political level, and then this results in a lack of political and societal will to be able to invest in these systems. And this then leads to lack of capacity, leading to, again, lack of infrastructure, which includes monitoring network. And when we don't have infrastructure, we don't produce enough data. And then, of course, this results that we do not have the products and the services to be able to produce not just tools for planning, also for early warning. And then this cycle just continues. And really, at this point, what can we really do? Do we have the time to wait until we fix all these blobs and then start from some point? I don't think we are probably 10 years already too late. So from WMO standpoint, what we try to promote at this point is we really start from what we have. So we take the information that's in our hand and we start producing the data, and we start producing the products and the services that we can from whatever we have, from whatever infrastructure we have right now. We produce whatever we can the best way we can. So the idea is we support the decision and the policy by producing information that's globally consistent and is also accessible in form of different water information services in form of different products that's needed by the users of that particular basin of that particular region. So the idea is to then take observe the ground-based observations, whatever is existing, to top it up with remotely sensed information, to take weather and climate forecast, use models. Firaz showed us very good examples of models that are already available, and this is just one of them. There are really a lot of models that are available, and based on what kind of information and what kind of data we have in our hands, we can choose what kind of models we can go for. So it ranges from simple rainfall runoff models to really complicated models. So based on what we have on hand, we can choose wisely what we can use. And there are also global models that we can make ensembles of, and then use all of this that we have in hand to produce information. And at this stage, what from WMO standpoint we are trying to promote is whatever information we produce should follow a certain guidelines, should be produced in a certain standard, so that it's then comparable and consistent in a global scale. So the idea is not to reinvent the wheel, definitely not. What we are trying to do here is take the local and national products, to take the basin, regional, and the global products, put them all together in one envelope, make sure that the products that are coming out of it have a similar look. They're calculated in a similar fashion. They have a similar look, so that they can be really compared. And when we are making a map at a global scale, I give you some examples after, when we make a map at a global scale, we can really compare one part to another. This will really then help us to find out which parts of the world needs more investment, which parts of the world are being more affected than the others. So what we want to start with at this stage, when we talk about this globally consistent information system, what we want to start with a nowcast. That's basically where we are right now. What's the current status of our hydrology right now? And then we want to give a seasonal, sub-seasonal forecast. Of course, seasonal, sub-seasonal forecast serves more as a drought indicator, because if you see already in the next 3 to 6 months, our system is going to be more drier than wetter, you can plan in a certain way. However, it's also not just for early warning systems, but it's also empirical that this information can be used for better planning of our resources. So not just early warning, this serves as a envelope for the entire end-to-end planning for the entire hydrological value chain. So it gives us an idea of the current status, the current hydrological status. It shows us where we are in the term of normalcy. Are we significantly different from the normal of that particular area? And it gives us whether it's going to get worse or better. So how we need to plan our resources. And this information is not just important to be able to adapt, but also to mitigate. So for example, let's say we want to mitigate climate change, we need and take some decisions like can we re-wet some of these wetlands? For that, these kind of decisions to be taken, you need to know whether the resources are going to be available over the next 3 to 6 months or not. And therefore, these kind of systems are really really useful to help us fight or adapt best against climate change. And Firas mentioned something about hydrological information being confidential, and this is also one issue we are trying to navigate through this kind of a system, because we don't share data, we don't share raw data we don't encourage countries to share raw data in this platform. What we try to show here is really whether or not the condition is normal or different than normal. So it's really an indicator and not data. So in some, of course, we propose, and WMO has a unified data policy. We encourage sharing of data, but of course we understand that many countries not yet to share the data. So we don't need to wait until that happens, but we can start and we can navigate through this problem through these kind of indicators. And we don't have to get stuck that data cannot be shared anymore. So these are some of the examples of what I spoke about. So maps like this is an example from UK that I borrowed from our colleague Alan Jenkins from the UK CEH office. And what you see here is the different colors. And we know that UK had a significant drought this year. And this is what also the map shows. In the month of August, as you see here, August 2022, the colors basically show that the hydrological conditions in UK and most of the areas was significantly notably dry than the normal of that particular area. So this is the kind of map that we want to produce at a global scale. This is for soil moisture. This should show that we are not just talking about one variable, not just we are not focusing on a stream flow or a groundwater or a soil moisture, but we're really encompassing all of them and focusing on what the region or the country or what is really important for that particular area. So what's needed? We need to have data sharing in the area where the models are being run. We of course need the research to find out what kind of model needs to be, or what kind of model works best, what are the parameters that needs to be taken into account. We need the systems in place, we need communication, and before and after all of these processes, we need to assess the user needs. So before defining the products, we need to assess the user needs, what's required for that area. And then after we start producing the information, we again need to go back and assess whether we addressed the needs of the users right now or at this stage or not, or if it needs, if that needs improvement. And in the background, you see some pictures of emergency services, you see some models and all of that. And all of this is a byproduct of a system like this. You can only help people at the right time if you give them the right information in the right time, and only then we can be ready to produce, to help or to produce better early warning when we have the entire system strengthened. So this is a kind of a global map that we're talking about. This is from the annual State of the Water report that was launched recently from WMO. And the scale here is quite rough. As you can see, every basin has one color, because this is also the first time that this was being produced. But once we have a system like HydroSOS in place, it's going to be more finer. The grids are going to be more finer, and you see much detailed and much better information in terms of spatial disintegration. So the previous one was stream flow, and what you see here is trends of total terrestrial water storage, and how these global maps can really help us. You see this, it's very clear where the global hotspots are, and when you produce this information in a yearly basis, you can really compare which ones are moving, which ones are getting bigger, and where we need to focus more and where we need to adapt better. So HydroSOS, the hydrological status and outlook system of WMO, the idea is to give baseline hydrological data, statistics, information that's all necessary for the decision making and the policy making processes. And in the process of doing all of this, we of course enhance the national capabilities of the local capabilities of the national agencies, of the regional organizations, and it basically helps in an entirely developed value chain, so to say. And the shared information products in a basin scale informs decision making, plus also prevents conflicts. So once there is more harmony in the data between the different countries, there is definitely less conflict. And of course, all of this then helps us to see a global overview to help us assist in the aid and development sector, and so to say, to help us overall in security and in achieving the global mandates, and in our preparation, of course, for the climate change, the fight against climate change. And that was my last slide, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Sulagna. There's actually a question from Isabel if there are some countries that have too little data available. Do you think there are some countries? Yeah.
Many.
So that,
I mean, of course, this is not a stage to say who and what, but I can give some statistics. In 2020, WMO conducted a hydrological survey. So we had a kind of a template that we asked our member states to fill out, and out of the 101 countries that filled out, only 84% of the countries collect data related to the water level and related to stream flow. So 15% still don't connect any data related to these two very basic parameters. And when we talk about soil moisture, groundwater, and all of that, the numbers are even low. So if just to give you an overall picture, but for Isabella, there is, if you just Google for Hydro Survey 2020 WMO, there is an entire list of who answered what. I mean, it gives you a global picture, and it also gives you region-wise picture, and you can have a better overview of how many countries are at collecting what kind of data. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With this, let's do our last engagement questions. Thanks, Sulagna. We'll get back to you later in the panel. So how important do you think the data is? Sulagna was talking about the need for data. So please find the function at the top of your screen. There is the options and annotate, and then you can find the stamp. And is it important? Do we need data actually? Is it we sometimes talk that it's a baseline for what we do, but perfect. I see that you also agree very much that it's important, that it's needed. Perfect. I'll go to the next question. Thank you. So, this is again, now I stole one of your slides, Sulagna, as you mentioned you took one of Stefan's, so circle goes round. What do you think are the more critical caps, or maybe what do you think we should tackle first? WMO has one perspective. What do you think is important? Do we need to raise the awareness in societal and political level? Do you need to have products and services available? Do we need data? Do we need to improve infrastructure? Maybe this is something our panelists can also reflect in their discussion a little bit. So clearly all of these are issues, but maybe there are a few different opinions on which one we should tackle first. All right, I'll stop sharing now. We go to the last panelist, who also speaks about the importance of data and then how this links to making it user friendly. So Dr. Marco Masabo, he works as a program director at CIMA Research Foundation in Italy. He has had an impressively long and dedicated career in research, and also done some consulting, especially in disaster risk reduction. So it's an honor to have you here today with us. Please welcome to the stage, Dr. Marco Masabo. You can start your presentation.
Thank you, Maria. Can you hear me and see
Perfect.
my screen as well? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank WMO for organizing this important session with all the panel that have already highlighted many of the critical points that we are facing in making an early warning fixed system more effective. I will try to share some of the experience that we have, especially with one of the technology that we have been developing. But let me start with a picture. If I can just next. So this is a mango tree, and why I'm putting this one here is because during the Idai and other disasters, people has been climbing the tree for saving. And there's some people that stay on the tree for 3 days. And there was one lovely lady that even delivered a wonderful baby on the mango tree during the flood. And so I think what we keep in mind that in an early warning system, we want to save these people. And unfortunately, this is not only an example that we have in a less developed country. Just want to remind that in Kentucky this summer, we have a very similar situation where a family was saved because they climbed a tree. Actually, they were not able to save the entire family, but just the parents. And so that is something that I think we need to reflect. If we are seeing similar mechanism in one of the most developed countries of the world, and one in the less developed country of the world, I think we really need to think what are the components of the early warning system that today can make the bigger change. And for me, this one is something of the driving messages that the big initiative early warning for all will need to also influence our activity in that regards. The fourth component has been already mentioned. I'll try to see how the system can support the fourth component that are all essential. We need to know where the risk is. We need to know what the data, the monitoring, you have to have reliable hazard communication. Well, the preparedness and response capacity, I think, is very much something we will need to invest more, especially in the local community, and to transform this warning into action. What is the case? It is true that we need more reliable data, but also we need to be honest and say that there are already a lot of data and information that are not used for early warning. There are information that comes from local, from regional, for national, for global. And most of the time, those information are fragmented, are difficult to be compared. Maybe sometimes are also difficult to be interpreted, but not so scientific or technical used. But there are a lot of information already there. Not enough to have reliable and, not enough to have sometimes also reliable forecasts, but there are information over there. And in this, this is one of the driving force of Mailewetra to try to have a big data organizer that can manage a large amount of information that are sometimes difficult to access or even difficult to derive added value and to collect all this information in one single point, and to have one single access point for all this information. And the second driving force of the system is that for an early warning system, I think it was very clear even for the session, interactive session that Maria was mentioning before, the timing of the information. I mean, we need to have the information and the current and the forecasts in a time that allow the people to act upon. This is an example of one flood. Is a very old flood, but one person has the chance to several hours. And we see that what you was mentioning about in 6 hours, this is a flash flood. You can see the dynamic of this flood. So we need to have the information in real time. So the technology need to be established in a way that can facilitate, I mean, this establishment of the access to information in the real time. So those one are the two big requirements of MIDA-weather system, to have information as soon as they are produced, to manage large quantity of data and to make this data more accessible to the user. The third point, the other points that I think are very important is that we need to have forecast, but we also need to have impact of this forecast. So to integrate all this information in a way that we can estimate the occurrence at the location, but also what can be exposed and what is the vulnerability of that. And the system need to support this even on-the-fly calculation. That's also another requirement. So we started with the Italian Civil Protection, this global initiative we called the MIDA-weather Award, which is supported or promoted, but there is a resolution of the Commission of Hydrology as well on that. There is an open source as a single access point for multiple data set from a global level to the regional to the national level. So what we are currently doing is to integrate as much information as we can, and then any country that are interested can just access to this information as a baseline to work for the early warning system with the information that already have. And more than that, also there's a possibility for the country to integrate their own data, so they can have also their own data set, I mean the data set for the country as well. But at least it has a common, a starting point, which is already big, for me already pretty much advanced. So it's a unique data access point. Today we have data from observation network the partners decide to share. Of course, we only integrate information from authoritative sources, because it's also very much important that in early warning system, all this data information and voice needs to come from an authoritative source. We try to have a user-oriented, so to really go through towards the user need, as was mentioned before. Integrate other services. Copernicus service has a huge amount of information also in the US. And then also to communicate. So how to use all this information and to synthesize in a message that can be used and acted upon. And for that also we have developed what we call a bulletin application. So there is a space where the different forecast, the different agency can synthesize the message, so analyze all this scientific data, and then synthesize a message that can be delivered to the different stakeholders. They can be the population, as was mentioned before, but also can be the authority as well. This is an example, for instance, in Africa and Tanzania, how the information is shown. It can be overlapped among them. Hydrological data also as very much important. Another example that I want to stress, which I think is very important, is the impact-based forecast. This one, there is a lot of attention of impact-based forecast, but to my understanding, we are still having there are initiatives around the world on how we do the impact base, what kind of information we visualize, what kind of information we use. This is an example for IGAD region. We have implemented flood forecasting model in the Horn of Africa. And we're starting to compute with a 5 days forecast the impact of on different sectors. There's a population affected, a population that can be potentially displaced, cropland, grazing, livestock, roads affected the GDP. But still, for me, is that we have a little bit of open question how we synthesize this one in early warning message. What are the messages that we send? What are the information that the user will need to act upon, especially for an early warning system when we do a 5 days forecast. This is an example what we are now doing. We aggregate basically at administrative level, because it's the administrative level at the end of the day need to act upon or implement mitigation action. So that's the reason we are putting behind. We will see, I mean, in the practice, in the implementation, how this one will work. This is another point on the continental board, how we aggregated this information. Of course, depend on the user that we are looking at. Those are 3 simple bulletins that are generated from the system. The system generates semi-automatically this forecast, but I think it's always very important. Each of the forecasters then puts their knowledge, experience in the evaluation. One example on the left is for the African Union. So this is a direct warning system, mostly targeting international organization. International organization might need to know if there is any country where might have a disaster that will overcome their coping capacity, so they will require international aid. And that's just the warning that we're developing in that. And the second one is on forest fire in Ethiopia. It was mentioned before on the forest fire. There's a forecasting model behind that. And this one will warn the local WEREDA, which is the local authority. And so this warning is dedicated to that. And the other one is another example to Burundi. So it's very important that we have the warning that is targeted to the user that is going to receive. And these are 3 examples, one from the continental, 2 from the national one. In terms of technology, this system can use the social media. It goes also on CAP, Common Alerting Protocol. Can use Twitter, can use Telegram, potentially can use SMS, but this one is very much costly for the country. We are really using a lot Telegram. But when we go to the mango tree, is that the end of the story? And of course it's not. I mean, technology is there. This is one of the solutions. But then I think the capacity, especially for the local community, not only to act, but also to understand what we are communicating, even if we simplify, but this still need of raising the capacity of the local community to understand the messages and then to transform these messages into mitigation action at the field level. I mean, they are the first responder. And they are not the first responder only to disasters, but they are the first responder to warnings. And this, I think, is one of the main challenge that we have. Technology can definitely help. It is a big accelerator of innovation. Is there, and we should use, but we don't need to forget the capacity of the people is really much instrumental to make an effective early warning system. With that, Maria, I would like to conclude here, and thanks again for this opportunity to share our experience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Masabo. I think that was really nice that you ended with that. Like, of course, at the end of the day, these systems are there to save lives, to actually have an impact, to actually prepare people, give the awareness. Without that, there's no point in the system, essentially. It's done for the people. So actually with that, anyone, if you have questions to our panelists, we can quickly take maybe 1 or 2 questions still. But I'd like to actually, Marco, continue with you. I'd like like you mentioned the dissemination, so you can send text messages, you can send different type of ways of contacting, let's say, the end user to warn them. Are there any other ways that you feel like you could make data maybe easier to understand, or is there certain things, do you use language or a certain color or something to make this easier for people to know what to do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this one actually I forgot to mention, but even the bulletin itself is can be translated automatically in all languages that we have around. We actually developed this tool this year, so there is a supervised translation, even in Arabic now. So we integrate. It's not Google Translator, but it's a system for automatic translation as well. And then, but there's always the user need to clear the languages. So language is very important, especially in some contexts with our country where the people does not speak the same language. And so this one is definitely very much important. Yeah, color coding is again very effective and is used. I mean, people know that if red, it's more dangerous, the green. But the meaning, I think, is also very important. What we mean with the red, what is expecting, what is the scenario that is related with the red. So in that regards, I mean, how we raise the capacity of the people to understand these messages, unfortunately, cannot be solved just using color codes. We need to have more awareness and explain what is this color code mean. Otherwise, the people will not be able to act upon. Yeah, or unless the message is very easy, simple. We have developed another technology which is not it's not MyDeWetra, but it's just in Italy we are testing. It's called ET alert as a cell broadcast messages. So basically anybody which is under a cell will receive a message. Again, the technology is there, and then potentially we could say, okay, there is a one storm coming, and all these people will be reached. But what they do on act, how they understand this message, it's sometimes it can be even counterproductive. Now, of course, if we have a tsunami, we say, okay, you move, from that, but where these people goes, maybe it would be easier to stay in their place if they are not prepared and does not know what to do, once they receive the messages. So that's it. This is for me, I mean, the challenge that we have now.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Like, it's not just about how you message, even though the language and everything, that's really cool that you can do that kind of translation. I wasn't aware. So very, very cool that you can take into account that as well. But then what do people do? They need to also understand what is the safest place to go. How can you protect yourself? How can you protect your families in that case? Actually, with that, maybe we could also ask one question about like this. How do you then, we had the challenge of the community. How do you create this like social, political will and ensure that there is action in the community? Perhaps one of our other speakers would like to jump in on this. Would either maybe Mr. Larsen or Dr. Aljanabi, would you be willing to come give a few words on how can we take local action and especially create the social and political will to act?
Thank you for the question. It's a very important point at the end of the discussion today. Actually, we still need to work and try to transfer the information needed from the scientific side to the decision maker side, because we have a lack of understanding sometimes, and sometimes the information that we are trying to provide are not really ready for the politicians to disseminate for the people. So we need to work on that, because this is a key point to have the good response, because for the good response, you need to have a good coordination, good governance, at the same time, also appropriate action plan. And if you want to achieve that, you need to have this kind of information reached very in a high, let's say, a very good manner to the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reflections from Larsen or Masabo or?
I agree with what Janabi just said. I'm not an expert in the sort of communication aspects and the political process, but I think it is a key challenge to make decision makers more aware of the value of early warning systems and what it provides. I mean, we had this circle of the evil circle of lack of this, gap of that, leading to worse and worse situations. We need to break it, and I think political will is where we have to put at least a lot of our money. I think show them, look, this is what we can do. This is possible, but we need to invest. You need to invest.
That's correct.
Can I just, yeah. So
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. No, especially for one of the things on the community. What we have a project in the Balkans now. What we do is the exercise. So to have an exercise with the local community on early warning system. I mean, people in the civil protection, they are very familiar with exercise on the response. So we take boats, we take bags, and we put it. But with the early warning system, this was not the case. But that one was amazing, how even the people in the authority understand the importance of all the chain. I mean, from the hydromeds to the civil protection, to the local community, to the other citizen. So I think the exercising on early warning, so before the disasters, is very much effective in understanding and make this one more clear, how even this one will save your life. With the other one, the political will, I will say that, I mean, you are doing a very great job, especially this early warning for all initiative. I think this is very much important. We should all campaign for that. Will rise political will. This is otherwise. I mean, that's my hope. I don't know. The other one, it's very much more challenging to act from our research centers.
Thanks for your reflections. Yeah, definitely that would be ideal if we can collect and combine all of our forces. We all have different expertise. So if we can create that political will, get the financing, get the systems running, have the data, and then be able to give that to the people, I think then we will be successful. So Lagna, did you have a few reflections still at the end to this?
Yeah, I very much like the point that Marco and Henry just made about starting with the simulation so people are aware at a community scale, definitely, because we have seen that in so many places that the messages are delivered, but they just either don't take them too seriously, or as Firas said, they are more afraid of losing things than their life, and they really don't comprehend how serious it can get. So a simulation definitely is a good way to that. And I totally agree with Henry that we need to break the vicious circle of gaps somewhere, and the political will is one of the most important places to start with, because we need finances to do anything that we want to do, and that's where the finances are going to come from the topmost. However, I will just repeat the WMO standpoint here, that we can only increase the political will through action and not through words. So once we show them what we can produce with what we have in hand, and they realize the importance of really that it's really a low-hanging fruit, as Stefan said. It has ROI of 6x or 10x. Once they see that, it makes even more sense from the economic point of view for people who don't understand hydrology so much. Maybe they understand the numbers better. So that's what we need to start with, I think, just to add to that. And we have been speaking about the science, policy, and action nexus. So often we see there is a disconnect. So what we do, the cool science that is being done in the universities and the research centers often don't make it to action, often don't make it to the policy. And the reason for that is often also the communication, and because the politicians who are sitting up there taking the decisions don't understand the codes that we write or don't understand the numbers that we quote. And the science and the climate community was significantly smart in this sense with the 1.5 degrees. So this is something that you understand right away. You don't have to be a climatologist to understand, okay, it's getting warmer by 1.5 degrees. So we need indicators like this, which is easy to communicate and easy for mass public to understand, for media to understand, for politicians to understand and to connect with. So not in terms of this many hectares or this many cubic liters per person, or but more understandable numbers. We are still brainstorming around it, but very happy to collaborate with Seema as well to work on this together. So we need to break this nexus between science, action, and policy for sure.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we're starting to really run out of time, or we've already run over time. Christine already has been giving me the hint that we might need to, unfortunately, close this session. Thank you really much for the participants and for the panelists. It's been amazing to have you all join here, and it's great to have such active questions in the chat that we have. We will make sure to answer your questions also afterwards. So please, if you still have some quick questions, put them in the chat. We'll have a look and we'll get back to you with some answers to those questions. So thank you very much for the co-host speakers once again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Yes, absolutely. I think we need many more hours to continue this topic. Wonderful, a very interesting, informative, and interactive session. And thank you very much, Maria, and to our panelists for addressing a very timely topic. I think there's no denying that prevention is always better than cure. So early warning systems for all should be considered a human right to be guarded and to be protected. Thank you once again. So we hope to hear more from you after this forum. So coming up next is a session on policies